really mocking how Doctor Doom was, portrayed in the movie that I do not want to go off and actually mention by name again on this show.
See, I'm not going to make fun of how Doctor Doom was portrayed or how Doctor Doom looked. I merely hang my head in shame. They have taken by far one of the most powerful, manipulative villains in Fantastic Four history, and I think Marvel, at least in my opinion, at least. I don't speak for both of us on this show, but they have taken this phenomenal villain and they turned him into a class act clown, a pansy, and a joke.
Well, here's the thing. At one point, Doctor Doom was literally a god. I mean, he's got to be considered probably, if not the greatest Marvel villain, he's got to be considered within the top 5 greatest villains of all time.
And I completely agree with that.
You're talking about a villain that takes all 4 members of the Fantastic Four to best.
And I really don't want to delve into this movie any more than we already have within the last godforsaken months.
And, yeah, no kidding. Before we move on, it's funny because we're talking about remakes, all this stuff. Emma Thompson, famous English actress, she's actually went off and has stated that if, she sees another Spider-Man remake, she's going to hang herself. So we may hear some sad news about Emma Thompson, passing away in a couple of years with the Marvel Spider-Man movie. I just thought, I don't know, that just tickled my fancy.
We just took this to a twisted.
I don't know. I honestly, I can kind of understand, considering that this is like the 3rd remake of Spider-Man in the last 10 years? 15 years?
What I really want to see the direction of Spider-Man go is bring back the cartoons, redo the cartoons, new voice actors and all that stuff. I'd love to see Spider-Man with today's graphics done. Bring back old TVs, the whole comic book TV shows. Make a comic book TV channel. And honestly, I believe the viewers would speak for themselves. People like myself, and even kids, would probably watch it religiously, just because of what it is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I don't know, there's stuff like Fantastic Four just makes me, really want to go off and, looking forward to the fall season of a lot of our favorite comic book shows. And I honestly can't wait for, Daredevil season 2 to come out on Netflix, as well as Jennifer Jones. Those are...
Yeah, it's definitely
going to... Jessica Jones, actually.
It's going to be a very interesting fall. I know for a fact you and I are both going to be busy with a lot of stuff going on for, TV shows and movies coming out. It's going to be a very busy fall premiere, so it's going to be a very special time of year for us.
Absolutely. For those people who caught our episode with Andy on Tuesday, we are talking with him to see if we can do another fall preview episode with him again next Tuesday. Hopefully we'll be able to find a way to mic Andy up a little bit better. He unfortunately he wasn't able to speak up more due to medical condition, and so we are going to strive to do better, to mic him up, because I know some people were, stating that they just couldn't hear him.
Yeah, there are some plans to have him fully mic'd and fully ready to go for our next episode that he will appear on, which will be probably within the next month and a half, when the fall premiere begins.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you know what, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in about a minute, and we'll be discussing some interesting comments by Steven Spielberg.
And apparently by about what Captain Fizz sounds like. We will be back after these messages. Welcome back, everybody. We have some more entertaining stuff to talk about. I hear we have some Steven Spielberg news.
Okay. For people that aren't aware, Steven Spielberg had some interesting comments earlier this week, and about the whole superhero genre. And he went off and said that, he kind of referred to it as, several years ago, cowboy movies, westerns were the big thing. And they died out, and you see, western movies every once in a while. Most of the time they end up falling on their face, but occasionally you have a really good one, like Unforgiven with Gene Hackman and Clint Eastwood several years ago. And he has went up and he has stated there will be a time when the superhero movie goes the way of the Western.
Okay, now I respect Spielberg and I respect his opinion, but he's a load of crap right now. I do not believe with any ounce of my body that superhero anything will ever go the way of the Western, and for the specific reason of there are people like us who live and breathe superhero, and the fanboys, the geeks, the nerds, the neeks, as we call ourselves.
The neeks, yes.
We will not go away. We will not be silenced. We will not be forgotten. So as long as we are around and we have pretty much brainwashed our kids into believing what we believe in, comic books will never die out.
And well, I think a part of this is that comic books have become part of, our modern day mythology. Our gods and our Greek heroes and everything are superheroes. And so, while I don't know if I completely agree with Steven Spielberg, he did go off and had an interesting comment. About 2 years ago, he and George Lucas held court during a press conference, and they had some kind of interesting ideas. And one of the things that Spielberg went off and stated was that he predicted that Hollywood was headed towards an implosion because of too many mega budget movies, and we're seeing like tons of mega budget movies that are coming out, and a lot of them are falling flat on our face, particularly a movie that you and I are so sick and tired of talking about.
See, I don't classify that specific movie as a mega budget movie. As we've said many times, that was a movie that was pushed pushed forward so fast just because Sony was afraid to lose their rights, and that's not an uncommon thing. It's happened before. And I believe this X-Men is another example of a possible push, forward the movie so they don't lose the rights. But when you look at, say, Ant-Man and the Avengers and Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, I don't see a lot of these big budget movies that are actually flopping. Now, yes, depending on who you ask, they could be flopping. If you ask the people who are producing them or directing them or whatever of how much money they want to make, then yeah, I guess in a sort of sense they're flopping.
Some of them definitely would be, considered to be flopping. No doubt about that.
But I think, honestly, on this show, we'd be happy if we made $1. These are people who are making $500 million.
$500 million, yeah, exactly. It's like we pointed out, Disney going off and complaining that Avengers 2 was a flop, when that movie made $1.4 billion.
Yeah, we can't even make $1 on our show. So... And we don't complain about the money, and we don't complain about all that stuff. Why? Because we enjoy what we're doing, and I think that's what Hollywood has forgotten. They believe that comic book movies and TV shows are all money, and it's about more than money.
But I think the big thing here is that there's going to come a time when, it's particularly right now, there really seems to be an oversaturation, of, comic books. Anything comic book related in movies and in television. This week alone, we talked about 4 different comic book shows. And we didn't even bring up, shows like, Daredevil. We didn't bring up Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We didn't bring up Agent Carter. We didn't bring up
Jessica Jones.
We didn't bring up iZombie. And those are just the ones I can just pop into my head right now.
I do not classify iZombie as a comic book, TV show, movie, etc.
It actually is based off of a comic book series, so I do have to count it.
I refuse to count it. It's a debacle.
But anyways, there definitely seems to be an oversaturation on it right now, so I can kind of understand a little bit where Spielberg is coming from. Because at one point, there really was an oversaturation of Western movies, and so...
You can almost say the same thing about Steven Spielberg's genre, though. There's an oversaturation on that as well.
Well, if you look at Steven Spielberg, he doesn't do as many big blockbusters. He, might be the executive producer on some of them, like Jurassic World.
He may not, but and I thank you for bringing up Jurassic World. That was another one that flopped, and it was a big budget, hype movie, and that one flopped. So it happens. It's not to do with an oversaturation. It's a quality. People who are watching these movies are expecting more, are hoping for more, and they're getting less.
And I think there will come a time, I honestly believe, it may not be anytime soon. It may not be in the next 5 years or 10 years. But there will come a time where I think, if nothing else, Hollywood will take a break from doing superhero movies and move on. I mean, look how long it was between Superman, with Christopher Reeves and this set. I mean, there was like very few superhero movies during the 1980s, leading up until the mid 1990s.
But there is a reason for that. Can you honestly think of anybody who could replace the great Steve?
The great Steve?
Wow, I can't remember his name
Christopher Reeve?
Christopher Reeve. Wow, I'm so bad with... Yeah.
But, I mean, here's the thing, Christopher Reeve got typecast in that part. The first two movies were absolutely fabulous. He, sort of, got dragged back into doing Superman 3 and Superman 4 because he couldn't get work anywhere else. They didn't want him to be anything other than Superman.
Yeah, but besides the point, even like just the first two, can you think of anyone to actually completely replace him?
Absolutely not, and I don't think you should be able to. You should. I mean, every person who's played Superman since then has had to go off and find their own niche in that part.
And that would be the reason why you don't see too many Superman movies, for that exact reason. Mm-hmm. You get to this point where, and I'm going to use Heath Ledger for the Joker as a perfect example as well. You get this phenomenal actor or actress, depending on what the character is, who plays that part so well that when something happens that they either don't want to play it anymore, or they can't due to contract or passing away, it's virtually impossible to replace them or put anyone else in that role. So you choose to instead not make those movies.
Oh no, I completely agree. I also think that it's tough when you've had respectable actors or actresses play a particular role before. So I mean, it's tough for Jared Leto because with actors like Jack Nicholson and the late Heath Ledger playing the Joker before, it's hard to kind of go off and find your own niche as the Joker. Whereas
Jason Todd.
Yeah, exactly. But that may not necessarily be the case for characters like Harley Quinn or Wonder Woman, who haven't really before been successfully transitioned to the big screen.
Oh yeah, and honestly, Cobblepot, the Penguin, is another perfect example. When you look at Danny DeVito,
Danny DeVito was awesome.
How he played the Joker the Penguin was phenomenal. Now you got Taylor, who